That's okay. Let's start over. This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD Alderman Matt O'Shea of the 19th Ward. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Alderman, first of all, there was a problem with the pumping station, but now it's all under control.
Yes, we avoided any real disruption in service. The Chicago Department of Water Management throughout the night, Friday night into Saturday afternoon, completed the necessary repair of the 48-inch water main that provides water to the majority of my community and several neighboring communities.
Great. How old, do you know how old that pipe was? I know that throughout the city there are a lot of uh, water mains that are over 100 years old.
Yes, there are. In fact, that water main in particular that we were out on over the weekend uh, was installed back in 1916. So it's 108 years old.
Wow. Do you get enough support and infrastructure because there are a lot of moving parts in the ward, and then lots of infrastructure that might need repairs. Do you get enough support from the city and to you know, potholes and let's say the water mains throughout the ward?
Well, that's actually a great question. We have a very serious issue with our infrastructure. There are 12 pumping stations throughout the city of Chicago that move water from Lake Michigan all across our city, serving the entire city, but then also providing water to literally hundreds of municipalities north, west, and south of us. Much of that infrastructure is beyond its useful life. We talk about what happened this weekend. It's not the first time. It won't be the last. We need to invest more in our critical infrastructure. Water mains provide safe, clean, fresh Lake Michigan water to millions of people here in Illinois. And we need to do more to maintain the critical infrastructure that we have. We need to invest in that. And that's just not me saying that. That is Commissioner Randy Connor. They currently have an assessment survey going on at all of their pumping stations and the critical mains that provide that water, deliver that water. But we need to do more. You know, I don't want to say we're sounding the alarm, but could you imagine just this weekend if that 48-inch water main had gone down for a disruption in service? To think of the thousands of people who may not have fresh, safe, clean water, the business interruption, the interruption to our senior citizen facilities. That is extremely dangerous and not something that should be taken lightly. I believe we need to do more as a city to work with our federal partners, our state partners, to identify where we can get more investment in knowing exactly what we have underground, replacing, investing that critical infrastructure.
Do we have a clear idea of what is underground? Are there maps and diagrams of exactly everything that might need to be repaired?
We certainly have a pretty good understanding. Obviously, there's maps and blueprints, but as you pointed out, much of that infrastructure is more than 100 years old. You really don't know what you have until you get down there. And when I say get down there, you know, you're digging down 10, 20, 30 feet. In some cases, even deeper when you're looking at water mains and sewer mains that both provide clean water, but also remove dirty water, if you will. But there is a study going on as it pertains to the pumping stations. The Department of Water Management does a great job of maintaining what we have. I think the problem is, though, we have such aging infrastructure. We literally have hundreds and hundreds of mains underneath our city that are well beyond their useful life. And, the city tries to be proactive in identifying where there could be a problem, but oftentimes, you're rolling the dice, and if a main goes, it can be disastrous to communities that can't receive water in that period of time.
Definitely. And which department is doing this study?
That would be the Chicago Department of Water Management. Um, we also have the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District that works closely with our Department of Water Management, but it's very clear we need more investment in that critical infrastructure.
In other words, there is we would need more city funding, state funding, federal funding in order to address all this, and that's not even including the lead pipes too.
Correct. None of this is pretty. No one gets. It's not like when you're building a park or a school, everyone gets to see that and they say, "Oh wow, look at that beautiful structure." This is the infrastructure below the surface, and you really don't appreciate it until you don't have it, or when you have a crisis on your hands.
And there's not really a good way to be proactive. Just studying it, and then when you would build new streets, and then change the pipes as well, right? The water pipes and the sewer lines.
Yes, it's obviously less expensive, and all of this is extremely expensive. It's less expensive when you're tearing up a roadway and replacing it while you're excavating. Get a look at what's underneath, and if it's 80, 90, 100 plus years old, certainly look at replacing it. But yes, we have to lean on our federal partners for more assistance in getting an accurate assessment of what we have, and then funding a plan to replace where needed. And I think it's important to point out what happened this weekend. That was water management proactively identifying something they were concerned about and making a repair before something broke, before there was a disruption in service, before there was a boil order. And, when you talk about that, I can't be stressed enough what that does to, a community. Here we are the days before the holiday, and could you imagine if we had hundreds of businesses that had to close, hundreds of family gatherings that would possibly have to be canceled? You would not have fresh water. You would not have clean water. You would not be able to run your toilets. What that does when you're talking about thousands and thousands of people affected, and that can lead to very serious, disastrous situation where people's lives are in peril.
Do you know if it's Chicago that has especially old infrastructure, or is it a nationwide situation as well?
I think it's nationwide. When you start talking about underground pipes, when you start talking about bridges, that's a problem across the country. But because Chicago has been here for approaching 200 years, we still have some wooden water mains. There's a handful left. I remember in my community in East Beverly, when I first became alderman, when they replaced a main, they pulled out original wooden infrastructure from the late 1800s. I mean, that's crazy to think that thing was still operating, 110 years later. But that is the case in some communities.
It must have been cedar, right? Cedar is pretty resistant to rot.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Oh, how equitable is the money to be spent in every ward? Do some wards have more money to address infrastructure needs than other wards, or is are like the roads that are replaced every year, is it spaced equitably across the wards?
So when it comes to underground infrastructure, that is not something that goes on a ward menu, if you will. That is just where the water management, they have an enterprise fund where they identify where these older mains are, all the, where are these mains that could be problematic. No community, no ward, if you would, could ever afford to replace their own infrastructure. It's cost prohibitive. You would literally spend all your annual allotment on one block of one water main or one sewer main. It is equitable. Obviously, older infrastructure, parts of our city were developed, I have parts in my 19th ward that were developed in the 50s and the 60s. That infrastructure, only being 60, 70 years old is in good shape. I have parts of my community. I have homes that were constructed in the 1800s. The infrastructure in those areas, obviously much older, as there are older parts of the city. But I believe it is very equitable. And luckily, we don't have to pay for that underground infrastructure community by community.
What neighborhood is comprised the 19th ward?
The 19th ward, which is about 55,000 residents, is the neighborhoods of Beverly, Morgan Park, and Mount Greenwood.
I see that you've done a lot of work helping people with disabilities too. What work still needs to be done?
Well, I thank you for bringing that up. I serve on the board of Special Children's Charities, which is an organization that has been active since 1969. And our organization funds and supports programs for our disabled community. We support programs in the Chicago Public Schools. We support programs at the Chicago Park District. We focus on communities that lack inequity. We've invested significantly in schools and parks in neighborhoods that have less than many others. Special Children's Charities, I serve as vice president. It has a very special place in my heart. But we do a lot to support not only our athletes, but their families, and making sure that they know they're an active part of our communities, and to invest to do everything we can to support them, that they can still lead lives of independence and participate in activities.
What about the Chicago Public Schools? Are what more do they need to do in order to help the, students with disabilities to learn enough and then continue and then pursue their dreams, because everybody has their dreams?
That's also a great question. First and foremost, we can always do more. There are more than 50,000 Chicago public school students that have IEPs. We need to do more to support these students. They need more help. They're our most vulnerable population. They need more assistance and support than your average CPS student. I must say that CEO Pedro Martinez has done a remarkable job these past 3 years of being an advocate and a strong voice to make sure there's critical investments, particularly at schools that have large numbers, clusters, if you will, of students with special needs. I know that because Special Children's Charities has worked closely with him to help fund many of those investments. But as I said, we can always do more to do everything we can to support them so that, as you said, they can continue to achieve their dreams.
And you mentioned IEP. What does that represent?
An IEP is a written report from our special needs teachers and supporters that identify that a student, might need additional support. That could be everything from, high functioning autism to, something not as significant as a type of learning disorder, whether that be, dyslexia or Asperger's syndrome, and everything in between. But we see those numbers continue to rise, and they're going to continue to rise. So we need to do more to support them and make investments to help them.
Are the numbers beginning to rise on account of there is better diagnoses now, or are the numbers just beginning to rise? Do you have
I
any?
mean, I think everybody has an opinion on that, with genetics, diet. People have medications in their history. I think the biggest thing is we do a much better job of testing, and things that maybe a generation ago people didn't see. When I say people, that could be parents, that could be teachers. I often joke that I probably could have been diagnosed back when I was a kid based on my inability to focus oftentimes in school, whether that be staring out the window, not paying attention, maybe acting up a little bit in class. And today, we do such a better job of identifying where there is a potential issue, and that we address that by putting proper attention to it and bringing more support into the classroom to support the kids.
Well, oftentimes, staring out the window, daydreaming, oftentimes that's indicative of thinking outside the box. And you have been doing some programs, arts program to help these kids as well.
Yes, Special Children's Charities has funded art and music therapy in more than 60 schools. We've also invested in what we refer to as sensory rooms in about 20 schools. Most recently, we were just on the south side at South Shore Fine Arts School, where we had just made these investments. And it was great because it's one thing to say, oh, we raised money and we funded this. It's another thing to actually go to the school, step into the classroom, watch the interaction between teachers and our students who benefit from this, and then to hear it from the families. To have a mother say, oh my gosh, this has made such a difference in my son or daughter's life. It just reinforces why Special Children's Charities is so important in doing the work they do. And I can tell you, we're going to continue to work to identify where there's a need, to raise the funds, to support whatever needs to be done to make investments in our schools and in park programs.
Were you involved in the special children's charities before you became an alderman or during?
So you're probably familiar with the Chicago Polar Plunge.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's our event. We've been doing it for 21 years. I always took part in that before I was alderman and supported their efforts. And then after I became alderman, one day I was approached, hey, you've always been supportive, you've been involved. Would you ever consider joining our board? And I jumped at that chance. And, I think it's important as an elected official to use the platform you have, the voice you have, to stand up for those who can't always stand up for themselves. And I can think of nothing better than serving with Special Children's Charities to support Special Olympic programs and our most vulnerable population. It's something I'm very proud of.
You've done a lot of work concerning ethics ethics too. Could you talk about that?
Sure. I literally just had this conversation with one of my children who was home from college. There have been more than 30 aldermen who served in the city council who've gone to prisons since I've been alive. We need to do more as government to police ourselves, if you will. If we have elected officials who are abusing their authority or not, doing everything they can to protect the taxpayers, where are we as a society? So I've been involved in, writing and getting key legislation passed to address some of those things. And obviously, if someone wants to break the law, if someone wants to abuse their authority, they're going to do that. We just need to do everything we can to try to make it harder, with the hope that people who run for office would never look to go down that road. So I've been a part of ethics reform. I'll continue to look to partner with my colleagues on identifying more ethics reform where it might be needed. And hopefully some of the things we pass, other forms of government could look at. So that's an ongoing issue that we will continue to work on.
You've your work in the past can included not including forbidding aldermen to be elected officials to do lobbying, even for other causes while they're serving in office. However, what's your role in the Inspector General's duties now? Have the Inspector General's powers and duties changed? Has the City Council had any role in that?
Yes, we have. Our current Inspector General running the Chicago Office of Inspector General is Deborah Witzberg, and she does a terrific job. I speak to her somewhat regularly. Oftentimes I'll call her and ask her maybe to look into something. Sometimes I'll call her to get her opinion on something, to get her advice on something. I can assure you her office is very busy. There's no shortage of things that they can look into and investigate. But I think it's important that there be strong communication between the Chicago City Council and the Inspector General's office. They need to be completely separate of all of the levels of local government so that they can conduct their important work. And when I say conduct their important work, that's twofold. That's one, that they not be prevented from getting to the source of information and identifying where there could be illegal activity. But then also we need to support them when they do find something that should be looked at where we could change an ordinance or a law. But their work is critical to restoring trust between communities, taxpayers, if you will, and local elected officials, local government.
Does the Inspector General have enough funding to do the job?
It's interesting you say that. We just went through the budget process, and when General Witzberg came before our, I actually asked that question as far as both staffing and funding, and she was very clear that they are adequately funded and she has adequate staffing to do her important work.
Great. So what is the next step for ethics reform now?
I don't know if there's anything as far as a next step. We're looking at a lot of different things. I would imagine in the coming weeks and months, we will identify maybe different forms of legislation we should look at. But that will continue to be a work in progress. And something that I consider to be very important, and I will continue to work with my colleagues to make sure that all of our ethics reform is strong and can hopefully prevent something from happening.
Do term limits help prevent the ethics violations?
I consider term limits elections, and every 4 years, you have to run for reelection. My name has been on the ballot 4 times. If a community gets tired of a job that an individual is doing, they simply vote them out of office. I think the bigger problem we have is that people don't pay attention to what's going on in government. There's a line I like to use. Elections have consequences. And we've seen it time and time again. When we elect people to specific offices who don't know what they're doing, don't have the ability to lead, to bring people together, to try to find solutions to problems, that have their own agenda, that puts us back. That puts us back for years. So whenever the next election is, whether it be a municipal election here in Chicago, a countywide election, or a national election, more people need to get engaged. More people need to do research on the candidates, and then make sure that you participate in the election. Our voter turnout numbers are pathetic. Some elections worse than others, but to think that more than half the population wouldn't even bother to take part in the process and not have their voice heard. If you don't vote, you can't complain.
Mm-hmm. And it's always been like this, or is it getting worse?
I think it's getting worse. When you look back 2 generations ago, 70-80% of Americans took part in every election. Our last municipal election, less than 40% of the city participated. That's mind-boggling to me.
And oftentimes we hear that after a person gets elected, then it's there's so much time that's dedicated to preparing for the next election, and that detracts so much away from the work at hand, which is like a full-time job. It's very hard to take care of a ward well. Do you have any thoughts about how we could separate all that distraction for the next election, and then be able to concentrate more on the work at hand?
I don't know if it's so much for my position. Our elections are held every 4 years, but there's many offices that you're on the ballot every 2 years, where literally you win and the next day you're already running for re-election. When you talk about congressional seats, and at the state level with state representatives and senators, oftentimes it's a 2-year term. I think it's more problematic there. But I think you just need to get back to when people run for office, the taxpayers, the voters, if you will, need to do a better job of researching, well, why is this candidate running? What's their background? What have they been engaged in? What have they supported? To help weed out someone who runs just for a specific cause, or someone who may have been involved in something that wasn't on the up and up in the past. Again, we as Americans need to do a better job.
I was just speaking with a professor in another interview earlier, and he said that it's kind of difficult to engage the community. You would want to engage your constituents and see what they need, but it's hard to engage them in the first place, because there is this level of distrust, and you have to
prove that you are trustworthy, and then see what it takes to address that distrust, and then uh, prove that that one is trustworthy, and then engage the community in to assess what they need, because of course different parts of the community have different needs. Do you find yourself engaging with the community in some way like that?
Yes, I engage with my community both, many platforms. I use social media to communicate. I have an email system. I have more than 14,000 19th Ward residents that receive my email communications, which are 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, letting them know, incidents that have happened, responding to crime, giving them an update, all the way to promoting important activities here in the neighborhood. I also engage, do a lot of community outreach, whether that be as alderman or through my youth foundation, organizing events to support senior citizens, children. I'm accessible by email, by phone, or here walk-in hours. Here it is. It's the day before Christmas Eve, and I'm at my office. Our office is open. We'll be here for the community if they have any concerns or issues. We get more than 100 phone calls a day, more than 50 emails a day on a variety of topics. But I think it's important that elected officials have an open line of communication, are communicating using email, social media, but then also that they're out and about in the community, that they're engaging with people at the local park, stopping by their schools, at the local grocery store. Elected officials need to be seen. They need to be seen by their community as, that's my neighbor. My neighbor's out and about. My neighbor sees what's going on. My elected official, my neighbor, cares. And that's what I try to do each and every day.
And when people want to make an appointment with you, is it hard to, is there enough room on the calendar to meet with everybody?
Sometimes that's difficult. We just went through a 2-month protracted budget season,
Right.
where I spent the majority of my time at City Hall. That time at City Hall meant that I wasn't available here in the office to sit down with people. Oftentimes you can assist someone on the telephone or through email. And sometimes, particularly if it's a personal matter, if it's a sensitive matter, people want to sit down one-on-one. So sometimes that can be difficult. But we try to do our best.
Well, that's all you could do. What about public safety? How is public safety being improved? What needs to be done?
I think we need to continue to work on rebuilding trust in some communities with law enforcement. I think we need to make more investments in technology. And when we talk about public safety, less and less people want to sign up to be police officers. That's a fact that's globally a problem. It's a problem in Europe. It's a problem here in the United States. It's a problem here in the city of Chicago. The job of being a police officer, although a very noble and honorable position, is extremely difficult. And less people are willing to put themselves out there. So that's not going to change anytime soon. So what we need to do is make more investments in technology to support our officers, to provide more information to both proactively prevent crime from happening and frankly to react when a crime has occurred. When I say that, I'm talking about cameras and such that that tells the story of what transpired. But I think on a personal level, we need to do more to rebuild trust between communities and law enforcement so that people know they can go to the police know they can go to the community, and that there just be support both ways.
What's a good way to or ways to rebuild that trust?
Getting police officers in communities, in the schools, walking down the street, getting out of the squad car, talking to a group of kids on the corner, participating in youth programs, talking to parents, face-to-face interaction. When we were kids, we talked about officer friendly. We need more of that. And frankly, families need to do a better job.
And oftentimes too, we in Rogers Park, we want more foot patrol, but then they say that there's not enough budget to hire enough officers to do that.
Right, we're down more than 2,000 officers over the last 5 years. We were at more than 12,000. We're barely over 10,000 now. We're going to be under 10,000 in the next year and a half. That's less and less officers patrolling, whether that be Rogers Park or Morgan Park, particularly areas that have seen spikes in crime. Those areas want to see more police officers. We just don't have the numbers.
What about what other programs could we have so that there is less crime? Like, is there anything that maybe community programs in the schools, anything that could be helpful to building the community so that everybody is more engaged in the community, and then there's that sense of bonding with the community.
Well, I think it all starts at home.
Mhm.
In some communities, we're on our third and sometimes fourth generation where a single mom, there's no father figure present. Multiple levels, multiple generations in a family have had a loved one go to prison for turning to a life of crime. Those individuals have children who have children who have children, and how often you have a case where a grandmother is the parent. It all starts at home with the family. The families need to do a better job, to be more active as a parent, to support, to love, to nurture children, so that they don't turn down a path of joining a gang, taking part in street violence, taking part in drug dealing. And the other component of that is when there is someone who's gone down that path, if they're walking around the community, terrorizing a neighborhood, repeat offenders of gun crimes, we need to get them off the street. This revolving door that we see of our criminal justice system, where you'll read cases where, somebody harms someone with a gun, and then you find out 6 months ago they did this, a year and a half ago they did this, 3 years ago, like a path of over an extended period of time. Well, when is enough enough? We need to get those people off the street, and that's an unpopular conversation in many neighborhoods, because those people are terrorizing communities, and they're helping recruit other young men to go down that path. And each time this happens, another family is destroyed.
Yeah,
it all starts at home.
Right. Sometimes more than one family too.
Sure.
When
You know what, Trudy, I gotta jump off here. I got a 12:45.
oh, okay. Well, thank you so much. Maybe we could talk about talk again. So there's one more question I did want to ask. Is there time for one more question? Or
Sure.
no? Okay. Lately, I've heard a lot of people say that there's been more fees being assessed on them, like maybe fines on something that happened a long time ago, like maybe something in something overgrown lawn or something, and they were wondering if it's on account of the budget shortfall, and then people they're getting more fines now. Your constituents come to you complaining about more fines now? Have you seen that?
I think every neighborhood's complaining about that. This most recent budget we just saw passed last week is another example of that. We continue to nickel and dime communities on minor offenses to be able to raise the revenue to operate government. It's not sustainable. What we need to do as government is rein in our spending and live within our means. And what I say by that is, I'm a father and a husband. My wife and I are raising 3 children. I have 2 in college and 1 in high school. It's very expensive to educate your children. So what do? You live within your means. You go on a budget. Government, on the other hand, doesn't live within its means. They don't go on a budget. They just spend and spend and spend. And that's what we've done in the city here. You know, when I became alderman 14 years ago, our annual budget was $10 billion. This last one was 17 billion. We've nearly doubled our city budget in 14 years. We can't continue to spend like that.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Matt O'Shea, Alderman of the 19th Ward. And if our listeners want to learn more about you or contact you, where should they go?
My email address, Matt O'Shea at the19thward.com. Or you can go to our website here at the 19th Ward, www.the19thward.com.
Thank you so much, Alderman O'Shea.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.